Well, friends, here we are. We're at the finale, the final of the sermon series on getting back to good. I hope that you've enjoyed this journey. I've been listening to your comments and your questions and your emails and the letters that you've handwritten, and I'm just so grateful to have this communication with you in this time when we're all separated, that we can all be together in this common love of God and thirst for righteousness in our lives. This is the last of the sermon series where we're going to talk about our partners, gentleness for the people closest to us. And even if you're not in a couple, even if you're not married or engaged or something like that, this sermon is going to be about our closest relationships, the people we see the most. And a reminder is our working definition of the fruits of the Spirit is when the goodness of God grows organically in our lives, when the goodness of the Jesus story of new life and resurrection becomes new life and resurrection for us. It's the natural growth of things to be good, of producing fruit in our lives. So today we're going to talk about those closest relationships, our partners, the people who know us best. And we saved 3 of the fruits of the Spirit. Each of the rest have only gotten 2 so far. But we saved 3 for our partners because they need the very best that we have to offer. Somebody say amen. Our partners give so much for us. They are our closest relationship. On the positive side, they are the people who know us the best, the most. They know everything there is to know about us. And on the negative side, they're the people who know us the best, the most. And they know everything about us. They've heard all of our stories. They were probably there when our stories happened, and they've watched us evolve in the telling of that story. These are the people who know our daily routines, all of them. These are the people who know when we follow through on things and when we don't. These are the people who know how good we are at home versus how much time we spend out in the world. These people know how much weight we've gained in quarantine. These people are the ones who know us so well. So what I want to invite you to consider is that this is a sacred connection. There's a holiness in between you. And one of my favorite authors, Rob and his wife, Kristen Bell, wrote this book that Ashley and I have found really helpful. And it's called The Zimzam of Love. And Rob, who's a pastor, uncovered this ancient word, Zimzam, which theologians have used to talk about the space between us. Theologians use this phrase to say, in between me and you, there's a vortex. And in that vortex, it catches everything that happens between us. And so here's the thing. When people come and they sit on my couch and they're having trouble in their marriage, they sit there and they say, well, I say, tell me what went wrong. And they're like, well, it wasn't really any big one thing that happened. And this is the truth. When we think about divorce or couples headed for divorce, what we think about is like somebody throwing plates against the wall, right? What we think about is people having a big blow-up moment. And actually, what happens more often is that the fire goes out. What happens less is not some big argument, but a million tiny arguments. Because the Zimzam, it collects everything, all the cold shoulders, all the times that we canceled date night and didn't reschedule. The Zimzam collects all of the little love notes, all the times that we did the dishes because we knew that they had a tough day. It collects all the times that we sit next to each other on the couch versus across the room. It collects all the time. The Zimzam collects everything, and it misses nothing. And so one of the lies is that people who are in healthy relationships don't fight, and that people who are headed for divorce are the ones who fight. And it's actually the complete opposite. Healthy couples fight about everything because the Zimzam is the dance. Healthy couples are negotiating everything because we're that close. You see, you only fight when you're close. if the Zimzam is too big, if you're too far away, there's nothing to fight about. And the fire goes cold. Today we're going to talk a little bit about things that don't go well with our partners and things that do go well. And a lot of this is based on the work of John Gottman. He's he's an expert on marriage. He should know he's on his third one, right? So, but he has studied marriage for over 30 years. And in a scientific way, they have been able to predict how the likelihood that a marriage will last or end in divorce by a 90+% accuracy. So their methods work. 2 years ago, Don Acevedo and myself co-led a marriage workshop here at CTK, and we'll do one again before too long. And we used this. We did it for 2 Saturdays, and we used the Gottman Method here. So here's what Gottman did. He took a bunch of couples, and he put them in a B&B that was like every other B&B, except for there was a two-way mirror in this B&B. And for the weekend, he would observe you in the living room. He didn't have cameras everywhere, but he observed you when you were in each other's company. And he would take the same couple and invite them back year after year, so it wasn't just a big study in breadth, but also in depth, that 20 years later, he's working with the same couples, and he learned to see the patterns of couples that were doing things well and learned to see the patterns of the couples that weren't. And he calls these things the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These are all the things that we do wrong in our arguments. I told you healthy couples fight. That's the natural thing to do, is to hook horns a little bit. And the first one, he says, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, all of these are guaranteed to make a lose-lose out of your argument. Guaranteed to become lose-lose in your arguments. All of these will blow up your relationship. The first one is criticism. Criticism is what happens when you're in the conversation and you look at the other person and you say, "What is wrong with you?" Okay? Criticism is suggesting that the problem is on the other side of the argument, right? Criticism is looking at the other person with blame, with annoyance, with defiance, with a self-loathing that you are coupled with them, okay? And this does really, really bad things to that conversation, and it leads to more and more fights. The second one is defensive-ness, right? It's whenever you've messed up to turn it around on someone else, to change the subject, to not let that in the argument. I got permission before I said this, but this is Ashley's favorite, right? Defensiveness is when we sort of not allow in the information that's coming at us, but we turn it back around. The third one is disrespect or contempt, which it can be a lot like criticism, but this one is a looking down on the other person. This is treating the other person like they're less than you, like you're morally superior to whatever they just did. And of all of them, this will blow up a relationship faster than any other. Disrespect or contempt is the number one leader of divorce of all of these bad fighting methods. And the fourth one, which I'll just tell you is my personal favorite, is called stonewalling. And men are really good at this one because we get what's called flooded. And when we get emotionally flooded, men are afraid to process that. We're not good emotional processors because we kind of dam up our emotions, and then sometimes they break the levee. And we're afraid of ourselves when that happens. We're afraid of what we'll say or what we'll do, what we'll break in the apartment or a house. And so what men do is shut down. They just stop listening. They stop participating in the argument. And you can usually tell that someone's shut down because they won't meet your gaze. They'll turn their feet away from you, right? Or we tend to put our feet toward the direction of the thing that we're interested in. Men will do this, and then we'll do this, right? which is just this classic posture of stonewalling. So each of these four things was a predictor for how unhealthy your arguments would be. So what the Gottman and his team would do is they would watch couples negotiate a little argument, right? Just a little one, like, are you gonna pick up grandma from the airport? No, I thought you said you were going to. No, I told you that I couldn't because I've got this appointment. I told you that already. Well, I thought that was for Thursday. You're saying that's on Wednesday? You see what I'm saying? This happens a lot, right? We're negotiating every inch of our relationships. And when these four things show up, then we are going for a lose-lose in our relationships. I think each of us has one of these that is our go-to. And if yours is disrespect, I suggest you at least find another one. Because if you talk down to someone, if you become condescending to them, it's going to be over. It's going to be over. Criticism and defensiveness and stonewalling, I think, are at least a little bit healthier. But it's good to notice that they're happening. And actually, Ashley and I went through this Gottman sort of training, and we use some of this language. Not all the time, not usually in the moment, but later, hey, you're doing that thing. You're doing that thing, right? So let's stop doing that thing. The first step is knowing that you have a problem, right? So finding your way through these, and we're going to talk about the things that do these things better. Well, the good news for us is that we know the number of positive interactions to negative interactions is the best predictor of success of the relationship. Gottman says that healthy couples have 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative reaction. That's actually pretty good if you think about it. This is actually what he says is required for you to have a healthy, happy relationship, right? It's not that everything goes away or magically disappears, right? In some weird way, opposites attract, which is just the weirdest thing, right? That we do as humans. It's one of the weirdest things we do as humans. We're like, okay, I want to find somebody who makes no sense to me, and I want to couple up with them for the rest of my life. But, that's God mixing things up. That's the jazz music of living in God's universe. And then he found that unhealthy couples had a positive to negative interaction of less than 1 to 1. It was actually 0.8 to 1. And I put 0.8, and then I didn't like the dot, and then the 8, and then the colon. Like the whole thing just didn't look right. So I put the less than symbol. If what you're doing is more negative interactions than positive ones, it's going to go badly, okay? That seems so obvious to say it out loud. Intellectually, we know that to be true. But each of these, he talks about an emotional bank account. Each of these, you have to continually raise the balance. And he said, there are some couples out there, and I think we can all think of a few, that are master-level couples. And they have 20 to 1 positive interactions to negative ones. Now, what are positive interactions and what are negative ones? Every single thing we put in the Zimzam is a positive or a negative. And maybe there's a few neutrals in there, right? Like I got up and then woke you up because you told me to, and then you were grouchy when I woke you up, right? Not really a positive, but not really a negative either. It just kind of was. But most of the things we do, where we sit next to each other on the couch, if we'd rather take 1 car than 2, if we say, I love you 15 times a day versus if we say, I love you once or never, if we hug goodbye and hello, if we check in with each other and ask about our day, you know these things when they happen, and they're different for each couple. But the universality is the ratio. The universality is a 5 to 1 is a minimum for healthy couples. So I've got 5 recommendations for you of things you can do to improve your relationship with those people who are closest to you in your lives. Again, this can be your spouse, but it can also just be the people that you are most intimate with, the people you talk to every day, the people who are in your environment every day. The first one is to breathe. We're going to call this one self-control for today, for the fruits of the Spirit. But if your heart rate gets over 100, it means that you are flooded. And what that means is that your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that separates you from other animals, the part of your brain that allows you to put words together in meaningful and interesting ways, the part of your brain that can listen oratorily and make sense of what another person is saying, that part is done. If your heartbeat gets over 100, that part is done. You can no longer make a rational conversation. You can no longer listen. And this gets you in big trouble because something that's said in the heat of the moment, later on, he or she or whomever you're in a partner with is really upset about that, and you don't remember saying it. That's not good, right? When you don't know what you should apologize for later, that's not good. That is a problem. And so what Gottman and some others have tried to do after this is actually have marriage counseling where people wore those little finger monitors. And whenever you got over 100, you had to stop talking and start breathing. Can you imagine how infuriating that would be? I'm sure it works. But it has got to be really difficult. But the truth is, the best gift you can give your partner when you're in a disagreement is to breathe and to practice the self-control of regulating your own heartbeat. By the way, there are a lot of health concerns that come out of fighting too much, right? Elevated heart rate on a continual basis is very bad for your heart. So breathing is the first one. The second one is this. I put this, the soccer ball for you, Pastor Athena, is to take responsibility. And Gottman says, oftentimes what we do is say, well, I did my part. I said I'm sorry, or I did the dishes, or whatever. And we think, the ball's in their court now, okay? You see how that's not helpful? You see how that's not helpful for you to say, okay, well, in my mind, I paid money into the emotional bank account, so it's now my turn for them to come to me. Well, guess what happens? Both people think the ball is in the other person's court. And then what was this big of an argument becomes this big, and it lasts a week or a month or a year. And all of a sudden, there's no intimacy in the relationship in any way. There's no further conversation. There's nothing deep happening at all. This is how the fire goes out. Because we think it's their time. We think it's their time. We've got a scroll. We've kept score. And it's their time to take responsibility. Well, guess what? That doesn't work, okay? Gottman has scientifically proven that that doesn't work. You have to keep the ball in your court. You have to continue to own your part of the relationship. Because if you think the ball's in their court and you let time go by, you are committing a foul. You are committing a penalty. You have to own your own behavior in the thing. And when we walk away from an argument and we start working on that argument in our heads about how we were right, not helpful. No relationship has ever gotten better because one person walked away from an argument and convinced themselves they were right. That's never worked. It doesn't work at all. Gottman says, don't rehearse the argument later on. Don't rehearse it. Only do it when you're together. Or if you're going to spend time away, contemplate your own actions, the things that you can manage. Here's the third one, Gottman says. He says, foster appreciation. If you want to know what fills the emotional bank account, it's this. It's when we can say to each other, hey, thanks so much. Thanks for picking up the kids today. Hey, I really appreciated that you did this, or you did this chore, or you did this chore. And Gottman's saying this in a lecture one time that I was watching, and this woman raises her hand and she says, I don't think I should do this to my husband because he never thanks me for doing the dishes or sweeping the floor or anything. And Gottman looks at her and says, okay, I hear you. And do you like not being appreciated? And she says, no. And he says, Well, then so you see why we need to foster appreciation, right? Like you have to be part of the solution. And it's not equal. Life is messy. Life is always messy. In this pandemic life, it's really messy. It's really important that we use our words to foster fruits of the Spirit, that we foster appreciation in the other. And sometimes that can be, wow, hey, I heard you on that call today, because let's be honest, we all work 10 feet away from each other. I really heard how you stood up to your boss. That was awesome. I really heard how you were gentle to that person. That was amazing. I heard how you were on the phone with your mom today. That was really cool. All of the ways that we can foster appreciation fills the emotional bank account in ways that are very meaningful. So if you don't think that all the little things matter, I'm telling you, they do. The Zimzam collects everything that happens. Here's the fourth one. Gottman says that we need to turn towards each other. We need to turn towards each other after an argument, he says. We make something called repair attempts. After something's been, imagine that your relationship is a bridge, and you spend an hour, both of you, destroying the bridge. He says, come back together. Once you've settled down, start to repair the relationship together. And one of the things you can do is start to learn how your partner makes repair attempts. Learn how your partner tries to make things better. Learn their love language to you after a fight when they're trying to own it for themselves, right? Because not everybody wants to talk through that. Some people just want to say, my bad, mea culpa, in their own way. And that might be making your favorite meal for dinner. That might be leaving you a note that just says, I love you. That might be a bunch of funny TikToks that made you think of them, right? We all have our own language for how we make repair attempts. But I think it's worth saying that you should start to notice what you do to bring back, right? Sometimes Ashley just kind of slides her hand out just a little bit to hold mine sitting on the couch, right? Even if we've been fighting or something like that, it's that, hey, I got you. Hey, I'm still here. Hey, I'm still in this. Hey, I'm still turning back. Hey, we're going to get through this, right? And so when you have kids and you're all at home all the time, it's not like you can have a bunch of open arguments. A lot of things go unsaid because, there's swirling things around you. But the Zimzam catches all of those little moments where we slide our hands over to each other. All of the faithful ways that we continue to turn toward each other. Here's the fifth one. This was a game changer for me. Conflict is almost never solved. If you've been going to a marriage counselor to find conflict resolution, stop. Or go to another counselor or change the conversation, okay? Because 70%, Gottman says, of our conflicts are part of our core self. It's that super weird thing about we're attracted to people who are completely different from us. And they have core philosophical differences from us, which is why they were exotic and amazing when we met them. We thought that they were super cool. We fell in love with them right away. We had never met anyone like them. We wrote poetry about them. We fell hard for them. We thought of all the wonderful, beautiful things we wanted to do for them and with them. Those are part of their core self. And so we get into a relationship. 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, 50 years. And we think, God, why are they so different from me? And it was part of the recipe. What makes things interesting, what makes the flavor interesting, is when we mix things together that are different, right? What makes the symphony is when we put 2 instruments together that you didn't expect. So if you're looking at your partner and thinking, why are you so different? It'd be helpful to remember a time when their difference was beautiful to you, when how different they were from you was amazing. And realize that almost all of our conflicts are never resolved. They are managed. And so a lot of people, they get into like marriage counseling, and they go in and they feel good for an hour. It's like going to a chiropractor, right? They feel good for an hour, and they're like, oh man, we sure did solve that problem about how you're a total slob and I'm a total neat freak, right? Yeah, I'm glad we talked that out. Check, done. And then they get home, and what happens? He takes off his jacket, leaves it on the floor, and she goes, are you kidding me? We just spent an hour talking about how you were going to do this. And he's like, oh, yeah, sorry. That's who I am. Once you turn your expectation away from solving conflict to managing it, you find so much joy in life to say, hey, this is what I love about you. It's the other side of the coin, right? Right? But, I'm all tuba player, right? And you're all violin. And sometimes we got to realize how we love each other for our difference. I'm going to encourage you to get out your phone if you're watching this and take a picture of this. Just take a picture of it, keep it on your phone. I think this would be really helpful for you to have. The 5 things that you can do to make your most intimate relationships better are to breathe, take responsibility, foster appreciation for each other, turn toward each other, and learn to manage your conflict. And Gottman says this, and you're going to think I'm making this up for the sake of the fruits of the Spirit, but Gottman gets to the end of his lecture and he says, what the masters do is they do these 5 things with gentleness. And that is when the grace of God, which is gentle to us, the grace of God feels so gentle to us, like the warmth of the sun feels on our skin. It's that kind of gentle. It's the gentleness of flowers pushing up out of the ground ever so slowly, or a calm breeze, or the way that the waves meet the shore. The gentleness of God is when we can do these things and not only do them well, but do them with sincerity, with love, when we can take care of each other, even in our conflict. I met the love of my life in high school, which is pretty uncommon in our day and age, and we looked a little bit like this, and I know what you're thinking. One of us looks exactly the same. But, just be kind to Ashley. She, we all get a little older sometimes. Early on in our dating, I was reading my Bible. I was sitting in my dorm room. I remember exactly where I was, I'd had a bad day, and I just turned to the Bible, and I opened up to Romans chapter 12. And I was missing Ashley. We were in college, and she was in Virginia, and I was in North Carolina, and I was pretty convinced that this long-distance thing was going to be awful. And guess what? It was. And I'm sitting there with my Bible, and I get to this part that we just read, Romans 12. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. And as I read it, I just thought, love must be sincere. Ashley. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Ashley. Be devoted to one another in love. Ashley. Honor one another above yourselves. Ashley. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your fervor serving the Lord. Ashley. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Ashley. Sharing the Lord's prayer, sharing with the Lord's people who are in need. Ashley. Practicing hospitality. Ashley. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Ashley. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Ashley. Live in harmony with one another. I was done. I realized on that day that I'm done. I found the one. And she is nothing like me. The pastor who did our premarital counseling said, it's going to be really interesting to watch you because you're an ENFP and she's an ISTJ. You're an extrovert and she's an introvert. You spend all day talking, she spends all day listening. This thing's going to be really interesting. He said, if you can pull it off, I'm going to be rooting for you. No joke, that's what the pastor said at our premarital counseling session. So I started this sermon series talking about trying out for this play I was in, Romeo and Juliet. And it was the day that I realized that I wasn't going to be a Romeo in that story. And I was cast as Benvolio, which is Romeo's reasonable, responsible cousin. And we did that play 27 times. and each one of them was sold out. And we had this incredible thing, and Ashley was going to fly in. I lived in Arizona at this time, and she was going to fly in, and she was going to come see me be in this play. And I got so excited. After she bought her plane ticket, I got her ticket. I got a ticket for her in the front row. And I walked out on stage to do my opening monologue. I have this cool fight scene, and then I have this opening monologue. And I get there, and I see her, and she's right there. It's the only time in my entire life that I forgot my lines. Utterly and completely. I fell into a void of darkness that I will never find my lines out of ever again in my entire life. And it lasted about a fourth of a second. But it was a deep, like, oh my God, I do not know what I'm going to do or say at all. Well, the reason that I lost my lines on that particular night was because back in my dressing room, I had a ring. And after that Romeo and Juliet production, we went for a walk, and I asked my buddy George to come and see if he could stand behind a tree and take a picture or two. And he captured this picture of me telling the girl, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and mourn with those who mourn. As much as it depends on you, keep peace with everyone. And we used that Bible verse at our wedding. We used that Bible verse at my ordination. We used that Bible verse at our children's baptisms. Siblings in Christ, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. This is the good life. This is the good life. This is what God calls us to, beckons us to each and every day. And it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's going to be confusing and complicated and messy. And life is just messy. And sometimes you think it's all going to work out. You finally think your kids are old enough, and it's going to be great being to have them in school. And then a pandemic hits. Sometimes it doesn't go according to plan, like all the time. But the fruits of the Spirit are what happens naturally when we let God in and we speak God to one another. May all your relationships be blessed with the fruits of the Spirit. Amen.